Welcome to Champion Stories. If this is your first time here, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And now, on to today's story. The bustling Ninoy Aquino International Airport hummed with its usual chaos of travelers rushing through terminals, wheeling luggage behind them like loyal companions. Among the sea of faces, one figure moved with quiet purpose toward the check-in counter, his modest attire and unassuming demeanor allowing him to blend seamlessly into the crowd. Manny Pacquiao carried a simple black backpack over his shoulder and held a worn leather wallet in his calloused hands. Hands that had once delivered punches heard around the world. The afternoon sun streamed through the terminal's massive windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Manny's flight to Cebu was scheduled to depart in 2 hours, and he had arrived early, as was his habit. The trip wasn't for business or publicity. It was personal. His childhood friend Manny had fallen seriously ill, and Manny wanted to visit him before it was too late. The weight of that purpose settled heavily in his chest as he approached the airline counter. Behind the desk stood Luzviminda, a flight attendant in her early 30s who had been working for the airline for nearly a decade. Her crisp uniform was perfectly pressed, her smile professionally polished, but her eyes held the familiar exhaustion of someone who had dealt with countless demanding passengers. She barely glanced up as Manny placed his ticket on the counter, her fingers already moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The computer screen flickered as she processed his economy class ticket. Manny stood patiently, his mind wandering to memories of Manny, how they used to chase chickens together in their village, how Manny had shared his meager lunch when Manny's family had nothing. Those days seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the bond between them remained unbreakable. Luzviminda's eyebrows furrowed slightly as she studied the screen. The first-class section showed several available seats, but the system indicated Manny's booking was for economy. She looked up at him for the first time, taking in his simple t-shirt and faded jeans, the absence of expensive jewelry or designer accessories that typically marked the wealthy passengers who requested upgrades. The airport's intercom crackled overhead, announcing departures in Tagalog and English, while families gathered nearby said tearful goodbyes. Manny watched a young mother adjusting her child's backpack, reminding him of his own mother, Dionysia, who had worked tirelessly to keep their family afloat during those difficult early years. The memory brought a gentle smile to his weathered face. Other passengers queued behind him, some checking their phones impatiently, others engaged in animated conversations about their destinations. A businessman in an expensive suit tapped his foot rhythmically, clearly accustomed to expedited service. A group of college students laughed about their upcoming vacation, their joy infectious despite the sterile airport environment. Luzviminda's training had taught her to assess passengers quickly and efficiently. The man before her didn't fit the profile of someone who could afford first-class accommodations. His shoes, though clean, showed signs of wear. His watch was functional rather than fashionable. Everything about his appearance suggested he belonged exactly where his ticket indicated, in economy class. The decision seemed straightforward to her. Airlines had policies, procedures, and protocols that existed for good reasons. First-class seats were premium accommodations reserved for passengers willing to pay premium prices. Upgrades were typically granted to frequent flyers with elite status or passengers willing to pay the substantial difference in fare. Manny continued waiting patiently, his thoughts drifting between his upcoming visit with Manny and the strange turn his life had taken. From selling cigarettes on the streets of General Santos City to becoming a global icon, the journey still felt surreal. Yet here he stood, just another passenger hoping to reach his destination safely. The moment was about to unfold that would transform an ordinary Tuesday afternoon into something extraordinary. Though neither Manny nor Luzviminda could have predicted what was coming next, Luzviminda's fingers paused above the keyboard as she processed Manny's request. He had quietly asked about the possibility of upgrading to first class, explaining that he wanted to arrive in Cebu well-rested for an important personal matter. His tone carried no entitlement, no demand, just a simple, respectful inquiry that most airline employees heard dozens of times each day. The computer screen displayed the available first-class seats in bright green, mocking the situation with their accessibility. However, airline policy was clear about upgrade procedures. Without elite status or willingness to pay the substantial fare difference, economy passengers remained in economy. Luzviminda glanced at Manny again, Noting his humble appearance and the gentle patience in his dark eyes, her supervisor, Isagani, stood several feet away, reviewing passenger manifests with another employee. His 20-year career in aviation had taught him to spot potential troublemakers, VIPs and passengers, who might cause disruptions. The quietly dressed man at Luzviminda's counter didn't register on any of those radars. He appeared to be exactly what his ticket suggested, an ordinary passenger flying to Cebu for personal reasons. Behind Manny, the line had grown longer. A family of tourists fumbled with oversized luggage while their children complained about the wait. An elderly woman clutched her purse tightly, checking her watch every few seconds. The businessman in the expensive suit had moved to another line, unwilling to wait behind what he perceived as a passenger who would likely require extra time for processing. Luzviminda's training kicked in as she delivered the standard response about upgrade availability and pricing. The first-class upgrade would cost an additional 45,000 pesos, more than many Filipino families earned in several months. She watched Manny's face carefully, expecting disappointment or perhaps an attempt at negotiation that she had witnessed countless times before. Instead, Manny simply nodded with understanding. No frustration creased his brow. No irritation flashed in his eyes. He accepted the information with the same grace he had shown while waiting in line. The reaction surprised Luzviminda, who was accustomed to passengers becoming argumentative when denied upgrades or special accommodations. Nearby, a group of aviation maintenance workers took their break, sharing stories and jokes while drinking coffee from paper cups. Among them was Joaquin, a 25-year veteran who had serviced planes for presidents, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. He recognized faces easily, but the modestly dressed passenger at the counter didn't trigger any recognition. The man looked like countless other travelers who passed through the airport daily. The overhead speakers continued their announcements, while ground crews loaded baggage into cargo holds visible through the terminal windows. Flight attendant Clarita walked past, reviewing her passenger list for an upcoming international flight. Her experienced eyes swept the waiting area, noting nothing unusual about the scene unfolding at the check-in counter. Manny reached into his worn wallet and produced his identification and credit card. The documents were handled with the same care most people reserved for precious items. Luzviminda processed his economy seat assignment efficiently, printing his boarding pass with practiced precision. Gate 15, seat 23A, a window seat toward the back of the aircraft. As she handed him the boarding pass, something in Manny's demeanor caught her attention. Despite being denied the upgrade, he thanked her genuinely for her assistance. His gratitude seemed authentic rather than sarcastic, a rarity in her daily interactions with disappointed passengers. The sincerity in his voice made her pause momentarily. Security personnel Enrico and Thomas stood at their checkpoint nearby, X-raying bags and guiding passengers through metal detectors. Their routine had become automatic after years of monitoring travelers, but they maintained vigilance for anything suspicious or unusual. The passenger who had just finished checking in moved toward their station with the same unhurried pace he had maintained throughout the entire process. The afternoon sun continued streaming through the terminal windows, casting shifting patterns across the floor as clouds moved overhead. Time seemed suspended in that peculiar way airports created, a liminal space where thousands of personal journeys intersected briefly before diverging toward countless destinations. What none of them realized was that this seemingly ordinary interaction would soon cascade into something extraordinary, forever changing their perspectives about assumptions, dignity, and the true meaning of character. Manny approached the security checkpoint with the same measured pace that had characterized his entire airport experience. His boarding pass and identification remained neatly organized in his weathered hands, ready for inspection. The familiar routine of removing shoes, placing items in plastic bins, and walking through metal detectors felt almost meditative to him, a brief respite from the weight of his upcoming visit with Bayani. Enrico barely glanced at the identification document as he verified the name against the boarding pass. The routine motion had been repeated thousands of times throughout his career, and nothing about this particular passenger suggested special attention was required. The name on the document meant nothing to him in that moment, just another traveler among the hundreds who passed through his checkpoint daily. Behind the X-ray machine, Security Officer Ariel monitored the conveyor belt displaying ghostly images of personal belongings. Laptops, shoes, belts, and countless other items moved across his screen in an endless parade of ordinary possessions. Manny's simple backpack contained nothing remarkable: a change of clothes, basic toiletries, a small notebook, and a worn photograph tucked carefully between the pages. As Manny collected his belongings and moved toward the departure gates, airport janitor Miguel was mopping the floors nearby. His radio played softly, broadcasting a sports program discussing upcoming boxing matches and the legacy of Filipino fighters who had brought honor to their nation. The conversation drifted past him as background noise while he focused on maintaining the cleanliness of the terminal. The departure lounge for Gate 15 was gradually filling with passengers for the Cebu flight. Business travelers typed on laptops, while families with young children organized snacks and entertainment for the journey ahead. Elderly passengers claimed seats near the boarding gate, unwilling to risk the walk when their group was called. Flight attendant Marilu reviewed the passenger manifest one final time, noting special meal requests, unaccompanied minors, and passengers requiring assistance. Her crew had worked together for several months, developing the efficiency that made flights run smoothly. Captain Roberto was conducting his pre-flight inspection, while co-pilot Teresa reviewed weather conditions and flight plans. Ground crew supervisor Emil coordinated baggage loading, while his team worked methodically to ensure all luggage reached the correct aircraft. The afternoon sun made their work challenging, but years of experience had taught them to maintain focus, despite uncomfortable conditions. Their precision ensured passengers would be reunited with their belongings upon arrival. Inside the aircraft, lead flight attendant Benilda inspected the cabin, ensuring safety equipment was properly secured and passenger amenities were adequately stocked. The first-class section gleamed with polished surfaces and plush seating, ready to welcome the handful of passengers who had paid premium fares for enhanced comfort. Manny found a quiet corner of the waiting area and settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair. Other passengers scrolled through their phones or engaged in conversations, but he preferred to observe his surroundings quietly. The photograph in his notebook showed him and Bayani as young boys, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning despite their obvious poverty. Airport maintenance worker Dante walked past, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. His shift would end soon, but he took pride in keeping the terminal presentable for travelers. The job provided steady income for his family, and he approached each task with dedication that had earned him respect from colleagues and supervisors alike. As boarding time approached, passengers began gathering near the gate. The usual pre-flight energy filled the air, anticipation mixed with the mild anxiety that accompanies air travel. Announcements echoed through the terminal, while ground crews made final preparations for departure. None of the airline employees realized they were about to witness something that would challenge their assumptions about dignity, generosity, and the true meaning of first-class character. The moment that would leave them speechless was drawing closer with each passing minute. The boarding announcement echoed through the departure lounge as passengers began organizing themselves into the familiar hierarchy of air travel. First-class passengers moved toward the gate with practiced confidence, their premium tickets granting them priority access to the aircraft. Business travelers checked their watches while families gathered children and carry-on luggage for the journey ahead. Manny remained seated during the initial boarding call, content to wait until his economy group was summoned. His weathered hands held the boarding pass loosely, occasionally glancing at the gate number to ensure he hadn't missed any important announcements. The photograph of him and Bayani remained tucked safely in his notebook, a tangible reminder of the friendship that had endured decades of separation. Gate agent Rosario processed passengers efficiently, scanning boarding passes and directing travelers down the jet bridge. Her trained eye automatically categorized passengers by their seating assignments and potential needs during the flight. The first-class passengers moved past her with minimal interaction, accustomed to expedited service and premium treatment. Among the first-class passengers was businessman Andres, whose company had purchased the expensive ticket as part of his executive travel package. His designer luggage and confident demeanor marked him as someone accustomed to luxury accommodations. Behind him, an elderly couple celebrated their anniversary with their first experience in premium seating, their excitement palpable as they clutched their upgraded boarding passes. Flight attendant Benilda greeted each first-class passenger personally, welcoming them aboard and offering assistance with carry-on storage. The spacious cabin allowed passengers to settle comfortably while she prepared their pre-flight beverages and ensured their immediate needs were met. Her years of experience had taught her to anticipate passenger preferences and maintain the high service standards expected in premium seating. Meanwhile, economy passengers waited patiently for their boarding groups to be called. Young Mother Amihan balanced a crying infant while managing a toddler and diaper bag, clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of traveling alone with small children. Elderly gentleman Noel checked his medication schedule, ensuring his important prescriptions remained easily accessible during the flight. Ground crew member Carlo supervised the final baggage loading while maintaining radio contact with the flight crew. His team worked methodically to secure all luggage and cargo, understanding that their attention to detail directly impacted passenger satisfaction upon arrival. The afternoon heat made their physical labor challenging, but professional pride motivated them to maintain their high standards. In the aircraft galley, flight attendant Josefina prepared economy cabin service items while coordinating with her colleagues about passenger needs and special requests. The efficiency developed through months of working together allowed the crew to anticipate potential challenges and address them proactively. Their teamwork would be crucial for ensuring passenger comfort during the 90-minute flight to Cebu. Captain Roberto completed his final pre-flight checks, while co-pilot Teresa reviewed weather updates and air traffic control communications. Their combined experience of over 40 years in aviation had taught them to remain vigilant about safety while maintaining schedule adherence. The afternoon departure would face minimal delays, allowing passengers to reach their destinations as planned. As economy boarding commenced, Manny gathered his simple backpack and joined the line, moving toward the gate. Other passengers chatted about their travel plans or checked their phones for final messages before departure. The familiar sounds of an airport preparing for departure, rolling luggage, muffled announcements, and conversations in multiple languages created the soundtrack for countless personal journeys. Gate agent Rosario scanned Manny's boarding pass with the same efficiency she had shown all afternoon. His seat assignment appeared on her screen, 23A, economy class window seat, and she directed him down the jet bridge with a standard smile and brief nod. Nothing about the interaction suggested anything unusual was about to unfold. The moment that would transform an ordinary Tuesday afternoon flight into an unforgettable experience was now just minutes away, though none of the airline employees could have predicted what was coming next. Manny stepped aboard the aircraft and was immediately struck by the contrast between the spacious first-class cabin and the more compact economy section that awaited him. The premium seats looked inviting with their leather upholstery and generous legroom, but he felt no resentment about his assigned accommodation. His journey to Cebu was about reaching Bayani, not about personal comfort during the 90-minute flight. Flight attendant Benilda barely glanced up as he passed through the first-class section. Her attention focused on ensuring the premium passengers had everything they needed for departure. The businessman, Andres, was already reviewing documents on his tablet while sipping pre-flight champagne. The anniversary couple examined their seat controls with childlike wonder, clearly delighted by their upgrade experience. As Manny moved toward the economy section, he noticed flight attendant Josefina struggling with an unruly overhead compartment that refused to close properly. Several passengers watched impatiently as she tried to rearrange luggage to accommodate everyone's carry-on items. The bin was overstuffed, and the mechanical latch seemed to be malfunctioning under the pressure. Economy passenger Inigo, a construction worker returning home after months of overseas employment, stood nearby clutching a worn duffel bag that contained his few possessions. His weathered hands and calloused fingers told the story of hard labor performed to support his family back in Cebu. The delay in finding storage space for his bag was causing visible anxiety as other passengers pressed behind him in the narrow aisle. Young Mother Amihan had settled into her seat with considerable difficulty, her crying infant requiring constant attention while her toddler demanded snacks and entertainment. The stress of traveling alone with small children was evident in her exhausted expression and the way she fumbled through her diaper bag, searching for pacifiers and toys. Other passengers glanced in her direction with expressions ranging from sympathy to mild irritation. Elderly passenger Lourdes sat rigidly in her economy seat, clearly uncomfortable with the cramped spacing and limited legroom. Her arthritic hands gripped the armrests tightly as she tried to find a position that wouldn't aggravate her joint pain. The medication bottle in her purse contained prescriptions that helped manage her condition, but the stress of travel often made symptoms worse regardless of pharmaceutical intervention. Flight attendant Estrella moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and ensuring carry-on items were properly secured. Her experienced eye noted passengers who might require additional assistance during the flight, mentally cataloging special needs that could arise once they were airborne. The diverse group of travelers presented the usual challenges that came with commercial aviation. Manny located his assigned seat, 23A, and stowed his simple backpack in the overhead compartment with minimal difficulty. The window seat offered a view of the tarmac, where ground crews made final preparations for departure. He settled into the narrow space without complaint, having experienced far more challenging accommodations during his boxing career when travel budgets were limited. Across the aisle, passenger Leonardo struggled to fit his medical equipment bag under the seat in front of him. The specialized device was essential for managing his chronic condition, but airline regulations required it to remain with him throughout the flight. The awkward positioning made his already limited legroom even more restrictive, creating obvious discomfort before the journey had even begun. Captain Roberto's voice came through the intercom system, welcoming passengers aboard and providing standard flight information about departure time, weather conditions, and expected arrival in Cebu. The professional announcement masked the complexity of coordinating the aircraft's departure with air traffic control and ensuring all safety protocols were properly executed. As the aircraft prepared for pushback from the gate, Manny observed his fellow passengers with quiet attention. Each person carried their own story, their own challenges, their own reasons for making this journey. The diversity of circumstances represented in the economy cabin would soon become the catalyst for an extraordinary demonstration of generosity that none of them could have anticipated. The aircraft pushed back from the gate exactly on schedule, beginning its taxi toward the runway as passengers settled into their seats for the journey to Cebu. Through his window, Manny watched ground crews directing the aircraft with practiced hand signals, while baggage carts moved efficiently across the tarmac. The familiar routine of commercial aviation continued around him, yet something extraordinary was about to unfold within the confines of this ordinary Tuesday afternoon flight. 20 minutes had passed since Luz Viminda had denied his request for a first-class upgrade at the check-in counter. The time frame felt significant to Manny, though he couldn't have explained why. Perhaps it was the way circumstances had aligned, the struggling passengers around him, the uncomfortable seating arrangements, and the growing awareness of how he might transform this journey for others who needed it more than he did. Flight attendant Estrella moved through the cabin one final time before takeoff, ensuring all passengers were properly secured and prepared for departure. Her professional smile masked the concern she felt about several passengers who were clearly struggling with various challenges. The elderly woman Lourdes continued shifting uncomfortably in her seat, while young mother Amihan looked overwhelmed by the prospect of managing two small children during the flight. Construction worker Inigo sat rigidly upright, his tall frame folded uncomfortably into the narrow economy seat. Months of physical labor had left him with chronic back pain that was aggravated by the cramped accommodations. His weathered face showed stoic acceptance of discomfort, but the tension in his shoulders revealed the toll that air travel took on his already stressed body. Across the aisle, passenger Victor struggled with severe motion sickness even before takeoff. His pale complexion and nervous fidgeting suggested he was dreading the flight ahead. The medication in his carry-on bag might help, but the anxiety was already building as the aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the afternoon sky above Manila. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Manny made a decision that would surprise everyone aboard. He quietly unbuckled his seatbelt and approached flight attendant Josefina, who was preparing the beverage service in the galley. His request was so unexpected that she had to ask him to repeat it twice before fully understanding what he was proposing. The conversation lasted several minutes as Manny explained his intentions with the same quiet determination that had characterized his boxing career. Josefina's eyes widened with disbelief, then admiration, as she realized the magnitude of his gesture. She quickly summoned her colleague, Benilda, from the first-class cabin to verify that such an arrangement was possible within airline regulations. Word of Manny's request spread quickly among the flight crew. Captain Roberto received the unusual communication from his cabin crew and had to pause his routine duties to process what he was hearing. Co-pilot Teresa looked up from her instruments with surprise when the captain shared the information. both pilots recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented in their combined decades of aviation experience. Flight attendant Benilde returned to the first-class cabin with a mixture of excitement and professional concern about implementing such an unusual passenger request. The premium passengers, including businessman Andres and the anniversary couple, watched with curiosity as the crew began what appeared to be extraordinary preparations for something they had never witnessed during previous flights. Back in economy class, Manny returned to his seat with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just set an incredible plan in motion. His fellow passengers remained unaware of what was happening, continuing to struggle with their various discomforts and challenges. The crying infant, the cramped seating, the motion sickness, and the general stress of air travel continued as background concerns. What none of them realized was that their ordinary flight was about to become extraordinary, transformed by an act of generosity so unexpected that it would leave the entire crew speechless and redefine their understanding of true first-class character. The transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly, as flight attendant Benilde approached elderly passenger Lourdes with an expression of barely contained amazement. Her professional composure wavered slightly as she explained that an anonymous passenger had arranged for her to be moved to first class, where the spacious seating would accommodate her arthritic condition more comfortably. Lourdes looked confused, certain there had been some mistake, but Benilde gently helped her gather her belongings. Flight attendant Josefina simultaneously approached young mother Amihan, whose infant had finally stopped crying, but whose toddler was growing increasingly restless in the cramped economy seating. The news that she and her children were being moved to first class seemed incomprehensible to the exhausted mother. She repeatedly asked if there had been an error, unable to believe that someone would pay the substantial upgrade fees for strangers they had never met. Construction worker Inigo received the same incredible news from flight attendant Estrella, who could barely maintain her professional demeanor while explaining that his economy seat was being exchanged for a first-class accommodation. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he processed the information, thinking of the months of backbreaking labor that wouldn't have earned him enough money to afford such luxury even once. Passenger Victor, still struggling with motion sickness, looked bewildered when approached by the crew about his unexpected upgrade. The spacious first-class seating and enhanced amenities would make his flight significantly more bearable, but he couldn't comprehend why anyone would extend such extraordinary kindness to a complete stranger. His pale complexion showed the first signs of relief he had felt since boarding. The passenger with medical equipment, Leonardo, received assistance from two flight attendants as they carefully relocated his specialized device to first class, where the additional space would allow him to position it more comfortably. His chronic condition had made air travel challenging for years, but this unexpected gesture transformed what would have been an ordeal into a manageable journey. Captain Roberto's voice came through the intercom, but this time his standard professional announcement carried an underlying note of emotion that passengers had never heard before. He had witnessed many unusual situations during his aviation career, but nothing had prepared him for this demonstration of spontaneous generosity at 35,000 feet above the Philippine Islands. In the galley, the entire cabin crew gathered in hushed amazement as they processed what they were witnessing. Benilde wiped tears from her eyes while Josefina shook her head in disbelief. Flight attendant Estrella kept glancing toward economy class, where Manny remained in his original seat, showing no interest in recognition or acknowledgement for his extraordinary gesture. The financial impact of his decision was staggering. Multiple first-class upgrades represented tens of thousands of pesos, more than many Filipino families would see in an entire year. Yet Manny had arranged the payments without hesitation, transforming the flight experience for passengers who desperately needed relief from their various struggles, but could never have afforded such accommodation themselves. Businessman Andres, still in first class, watched with growing awareness as the formerly struggling passengers settled into the premium cabin around him. The crying infant was now content in the spacious seating, while toddler played quietly with newfound room to move. Elderly Lourdes sank into her plush seat with visible relief as her arthritic pain began to subside. The anniversary couple looked at each other with wonder, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Their own first-class experience, purchased to celebrate their special milestone, paled in comparison to the selfless generosity being displayed by someone they couldn't even identify. Back in economy class, Manny gazed out his window at the clouds below, thinking about Bayani and the friendship that had taught him the true value of caring for others. His simple backpack remained in the overhead compartment. His boarding pass still showed seat 23A, and his appearance remained as modest as when he had first approached the check-in counter. The crew members continued staring toward economy class, struggling to comprehend how someone had just redefined their understanding of first-class character. As the aircraft began its descent toward Cebu, flight attendant Benilda approached Manny's economy seat with trembling hands. During the flight, a senior crew member had recognized the name on his identification and quietly shared the revelation with the rest of the team. The man who had just spent tens of thousands of pesos upgrading struggling strangers was none other than Manny Pacquiao, a global icon who could have easily afforded first class but had chosen economy, then used his resources to transform the journey for others instead of himself. The realization sent shockwaves through the cabin crew. Captain Roberto had to compose himself before making the final approach announcements, overwhelmed by the recognition that one of the Philippines' greatest heroes had been sitting quietly in seat 23A, demonstrating the kind of character that transcended fame and fortune. Co-pilot Teresa wiped tears from her eyes as she processed the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Throughout the cabin, the passengers who had received unexpected upgrades remained unaware of their benefactor's identity. Young mother Amihan cradled her peacefully sleeping infant in the spacious first-class seat, grateful beyond words to the anonymous stranger who had transformed her stressful journey into a comfortable experience. Her toddler had napped contentedly for the first time during air travel, allowing her to rest as well. Elderly lords stretched her arthritic limbs in the generous legroom, feeling relief she hadn't experienced during travel in years. Construction worker Inigo marveled at the comfort that had eased his chronic back pain, while passenger Victor had overcome his motion sickness entirely thanks to the stable, premium seating. Leonardo's medical equipment had functioned perfectly in the additional space, making his chronic condition manageable throughout the flight. As the wheels touched down on Cebu's runway, flight attendant Josefina realized she was witnessing something that would forever change her perspective on service, generosity, and human dignity. The crew's initial assumptions about passengers based on appearance had been shattered by a demonstration of character that operated on an entirely different level than material wealth or social status. Manny gathered his simple backpack as passengers prepared to disembark. His thoughts focused entirely on the reunion with his childhood friend Bayani. The substantial financial expense of upgrading multiple passengers meant nothing compared to the joy he felt, knowing he had eased the suffering of fellow travelers. His boxing career had taught him that true strength came from lifting others up, not from personal comfort or recognition. The first-class passengers who had benefited from his generosity disembarked with profound gratitude, still unaware that a living legend had quietly sacrificed for their comfort. They carried with them a renewed faith in human kindness and the knowledge that extraordinary generosity still existed in an often cynical world. Airport ground crew member Emil watched passengers exit the aircraft, unaware of the incredible story that had unfolded during the 90-minute flight. The crew members emerged with expressions of awe and disbelief, forever changed by their encounter with authentic greatness, disguised as ordinary humility. As Manny walked through Cebu's terminal toward his reunion with Bayani, he carried no pride about his gesture, no expectation of recognition, and no regret about the substantial expense. His modest appearance remained unchanged, but his heart was full knowing that 5 families would remember this day as an unexpected blessing. The airline crew would tell this story for years to come, about the day when true first-class character wasn't found in premium seating, but in the quiet generosity of a man who understood that wealth's greatest purpose was lifting others toward dignity and comfort. Behind him, the aircraft sat empty except for the lingering presence of an extraordinary act that had redefined everyone's understanding of what it meant to be truly great. Thank you for watching another episode of Champion Stories. If you enjoyed today's story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring tales about Manny Pacquiao. Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and many times your ideas inspire our next episode. See you next time.